Hey everyone, it's Alexander Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and this is my review for Meg 2: The Trench, which is the sequel to 2018's The Meg, and once again stars Jason Statham. The movie picks up sometime after the events of the first film, where there's a new deep water research facility created that's supposedly Meg-proof, and Jason Statham is once again fighting Megs. That's what the trailers for this movie want you to think the plot is. When it came to the release of this movie, the only thing that kept running through my head was why? Because the first Meg in 2018 was a moderate box office success. I mean, it wasn't a flop, but it didn't make gargantuan amounts of money, and it got mixed reception at best. I know some people out there that really had fun with the first Meg, calling it a fun B-monster movie. I didn't really like it that much, because as somebody who's seen a handful of shark movies, this one was just incredibly underwhelming. It may have been more well made and had more money behind it than some other shark movies, mostly from the asylum, but it didn't really do anything to leave me impressed. And it was also a messy film tone-wise, because there are times where it wanted to try to be a straightforward horror movie, but other times it wanted to try to be an action comedy. And it also didn't help that that movie was incredibly bloodless. I think that was done to try to appeal to a Chinese demographic, which that movie and this one were co-produced by Chinese studios, so that makes a lot of sense that the movie isn't rated R. It also doesn't help at all that the director of this movie in particular, Jon Turteltaub, is known for directing mediocre stuff like Three Ninjas, the National Treasure films, sorry fellow millennials, I don't like those movies, and The Sorcerer's Apprentice. But this time we have Ben Wheatley in the director's chair, who I've only seen two of his movies. Free Fire, which I really dug. I thought that was one of the most underrated movies of the last decade. And the other being the Netflix adaptation of Rebecca, starring Lily James and Armie Hammer, which I thought was terrible. So this movie really could have gone either way, and unfortunately, it went down the route of being a terrible, unnecessary sequel to a movie that was already pretty bad. Not only was very little improved upon with the first movie, but this one is even worse. I look back at the first Meg movie, and while I don't really like it all that much, I have a much bigger appreciation for that movie because it's a very straightforward giant shark movie. This one, there are 3 sharks this time around, but they're all cameos. The movie isn't really about giant megalodons. Instead, it's about a deep sea exploration that comes across a mining operation that comes out of nowhere, not even established, and there's corporate espionage, there's betrayals, and occasional cameos by a shark. The trailers for this movie show you a bunch of shark action on the surface. All those scenes that you see take place in the last act of the film, and even then, for reasons I can't get into because of spoilers, it's scattered throughout. The first hour of this movie takes place in the trench and deals with this mining operation that, like I said, comes out of nowhere. There is no explanation for this mining operation. There's no setup whatsoever. And it distracts from what you want to see with this movie. The 3 giant megalodon sharks terrorizing people. And that entire sequence in the trench, it steals heavily from the abyss. I mean, there's one moment in particular in this movie that steals from the most iconic sequence, well, one of the most iconic moments from the abyss. I'm just gonna say it right now, there's an imploding head. I won't give away the context for what happens, but they steal the imploding sequence from the abyss, but in a very half-assed manner. I had complaints about the first Meg being PG-13, and this time around with that imploding head, we should have seen a gruesome aftermath. There should have been blood when that head imploded, but there's nothing. We see the helmet in the aftermath of the implosion, but it's just an empty helmet. You're telling me we got to see somebody's head implode and we don't even get a good look at it? Like, that alone should have made this movie rated R. But no, that doesn't happen, and the rest of the movie is just as squeaky clean and as bloodless as the first movie. Besides the imploding head, this movie really would have benefited from an R rating because it would have allowed them to be more wacky and insane. I mean, we all saw Cocaine Bear. Okay, maybe not all of us, but for those of us who've seen Cocaine Bear, one of the joys about that movie and what makes it work is that it went to that R-rated level. It wasn't afraid to get gruesome or violent and have characters react in very over-the-top manners to what's going on. Nothing like that happens here, and the characters are just as insufferable as they were in the last movie. Maybe even more so, because we get characters that are introduced out of nowhere. They're mainly there to be killed off, not by the sharks, because most of the deaths in this movie that aren't background actors are not caused by the Megs, so you're going to be wildly disappointed if you're looking for some shark carnage. And all of their dialogue is terrible. Like, there are no attempts at humor whatsoever. The things that these characters have to say when it comes to their camaraderie is pure nonsense. It feels like this was written by artificial intelligence because it just throws in every single cliched line of dialogue that you hear from the worst summer blockbusters. Sure, Jason Statham is back again, but this time it feels like he doesn't even want to be here. He's really going through the motions, and he doesn't even have the same charm or charisma that he had from the first movie. Lastly, the special effects and action sequences are terrible. They're absolutely awful. The Megs look atrocious. There's several other fantastical creatures that show up in this movie that look awful as well. The action scenes are poorly shot. The editing is choppy. It's just an ugly movie to watch. And again, it makes me really appreciate the first movie because it was straightforward, the action was clear and not a jumbled mess the way this one was. There's nothing about this movie that is honestly redeeming. Watching this film drove me nuts. Like, I seriously thought several times, I know what's going to happen. I've seen this done far better in far cheaper movies. I could walk out of this theater right now and it wouldn't make all the difference. And it didn't make all the difference at the end, but I figured to stay behind anyway because if I'm going to be reviewing this movie, I'm staying till the end. I'm going to give this a fair chance. I am not somebody who's willing to review a movie without having seen it. If I haven't seen the movie, then I'm not reviewing it. So that's why I ultimately stayed throughout this movie, no matter how desperately I wanted to leave. As for a rating, I am this close to telling this movie to burn in hell because nothing was learned from the first one, and it's even more incompetent and even more irritating to watch. But at the same time, I didn't have high hopes going into this movie, and when I walked out, it was like, yeah, I kind of expected that to be as bad as it was. Don't waste your money on it. Had I been angry when watching this movie, then I would have told it to burn in hell, but there was really no other way this movie was going to turn out. We all knew this was going to be bad. It's just a matter of, can you enjoy it for how bad it is? And unfortunately, I cannot. After Cocaine Bear, which showed us how you do a crazy, insane When Nature Attacks film, backed up by a major Hollywood studio, this movie is inexcusable. Although I gotta say, it is pretty interesting that one of my favorite movies of this year, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, comes out the very same weekend as the worst movie I've seen all year. Yeah, this movie is hands down going to make my bottom 10 list, and as of right now, it is the single worst movie I have seen all year. And there you go, that's my review for Meg. And there you go, that's my review for Meg 2: The Trench. I hope you enjoyed it. And now I want to know what you guys think about the movie. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, Threads. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.